G'day mate, 40 here. Let's see if this works a little better.
Yeah.
There's downtown Sydney. Pan to the Opera House. What a beautiful view.
It's like, well, you have to think of it as a private place where you have expanded rights. And I still think of it that way. I think I'm just kind of pushing back, from the other end at this point in my life. Maybe it has something to do with age. But I think it has just a lot to do with the fact that I recognize just how endlessly toxic this kind of atmosphere can become. No one, if you're on Twitter and you're trying...
So when people have more power at different points in their life, they want perhaps more regulated speech. And in other points of their life, when they perhaps may lack power, that they want more freedom of speech. So it depends a lot about your life situation and what's in your individual interests and your group interests to determine how much freedom of speech you really want. So Rich is talking about how dangerous free speech is. Yeah.
Trying to make a point. You don't want to be on 4chan where there is endless scatological, fake misrepresentations, gross, pornographic nonsense 24/7. You don't want to be there. And if that's all the movement is, if you're just this free speech warrior because you post porn and lie about people and drop the N-bomb or the K word or whatever the hell, I'm just kind of done at this point. I'm like, let's just sweep them out. They're not genuinely trying to add to discourse.
So I think a lot of what accounts for Richard Spencer's trajectory is aesthetics, like which groups are cool and which groups are uncool. And he got so deep and so in depth with the own audience that he'd been cultivating that I think he just became revolted to the very core of his being. And that this is the primary reason why he switched his politics, right? For questions of aesthetics and personal comfort and just feeling like, I cannot be associated with these people.
Free speech the ideal of free speech is based on a general level of good faith. Like you're trying to contribute to discourse. And if you're not, you can get bent. In my view, there has to be a basic assumption of good faith. And you might very well be wrong. You might be really wrong.
And it's a lot easier to have assumptions of good faith, right? If you share, say, the same religion or the same ethnicity, the more you have in common, not just ideology, but perhaps ties of blood or ties of faith or ties of national commitment, it's a lot easier to arrive at common ground of what constitutes good faith or not.
Fine, but you are genuinely attempting to contribute to discourse, or otherwise free speech is meaningless. And, and it can also have rather dangerous effects.
Yes, of course free speech can be dangerous. Richard should know about that. He was instigating some bad hombres, right? He did so much damage to Donald Trump, and I've never heard Richard talk about that. I've heard it talk about the damage that Donald Trump did to him. Never hear Richard talk about the damage that he did to Donald Trump. And so it's very easy to think about, so-and-so screwed me, but what about the damage that you did to other people? So Australia has much more restrictive laws about freedom of speech than America. And of course free speech is dangerous, but lack of free speech, right, may be even more dangerous.
Sure. The Russia narrative might very well have been overstated by Rachel Maddow and those types of people that Trump is in control, or they're fact that foreign actors are seeking or would like to seek to pollute the discourse and make our societies much worse in order to benefit theirs in the kind of zero-sum game, which in many ways of geopolitics. So this is a real thing, and you don't have infinite rights as a user of the internet.
Yeah, and I mean also to be a bit of an optics cuck, which I think ultimately I am. Thinking about it, I mean it's not like I think the problem with the optics was that ultimately guys like Nick Fuentes were bad optics themselves. They were optics. But I mean that's neither here nor there. It's that like the idea of optics is sort of kind of valid. Like, sure, we should be morally noble people. We should aspire to be noble.
This is Mark Brahman talking.
Be like a sort of cruel and vulgar view, and be wrong with like this view, this sort of epithets that people associate with the DR, especially during its kind of heyday, right? Like, there was a lot of kind of racial humor. I mean, look, some amount of that I guess is appropriate, but it's unserious. It's just like it's not serious, and I think that I don't think it serves the discourse, and I also think that I think that what happens is that people use it to kind of drum up support. So there'll be kind of these sort of leaders who are promoting this sort of behavior to drum up a base of support for themselves, and the people that they're drumming up are just kind of these anonymous people who are probably in a lot of cases just sort of looking for entertainment. They want to troll. So like some percentage of people are in the DR, as political as the DR is, are in the DR, just not a small percentage of people, just have fun and like piss people off and irritate people and troll people whether on the left or on the right, and so that's kind of and so those people who are kind of propping up those mobs, those internet mobs, or introducing people who are not really serious about politics.
People create an audience.
Here, outside, right? So I think it's kind of.
So you're probably responsible for a large degree of what kind of audience you attract. Okay. So I'm getting in the way of Japanese tourist photos. But yeah, of course, free speech is dangerous, but what's the alternative, all right? Lack of free speech is incredibly dangerous too. So Richard talks about, free speech is dangerous, but think about the alternatives, right? It's never just some, one direction question.
So in other words, good ideas can be muddied and made untenable by poor rhetoric, by these racial epithets. So I think that some constraints may actually. I don't actually think that maturity is there in these circles. People kind of control themselves and to exert self-constraint and discipline.
And I think everyone would be outraged if you were arrested for that or even fined.
Right, it's so black, and it's kind of like, everyone has that right, and you have that right even without the N-word. I mean, I'm sure people find many ways to insult people without particular words, and a lot of the behaviors will remain the same. But again, I think it would be a concession that Musk could make that could that could preserve thinking while just eliminating words that are unnecessary anyways. It might in the elimination of those words might also kind of serve to elevate the conversation and civilize the environment in a good way.
Yeah.
Right. The other thing too I'll bring up, and this used to be a kind of talking point of the DR, is that because it's no longer so much of a talking point. And I think that generally people are in favor of free speech. I think that you and I are also for free speech. Just the N-word may not be something that we necessarily require. But I think that one of the arguments of the kind of old DR was that in Europe there are these speech codes and you can be punished illegally, right? And so it's more of a constrained environment when it comes to free speech. And people used to make the argument, I don't know if they still make the argument, but that political dissent becomes more refined as a consequence because people have to kind of be more deliberate in their speaking, and they have to approach topics in a kind of more civilized manner, right? And not speak in a completely aggressive and insulting manner, because there are these speech codes in Europe. And people have argued in the past that that's had a kind of refining effect on nationalist groups, for example, in Europe. And there is probably something to that, I think. And so I think that maybe some constraints on Twitter would also serve that effect. Yeah.
Well,
No, I agree with that. I totally agree with that. But I think there's a problem in the movement in the sense that if we should even call it a movement, or if we should assume that we're part of it, which I don't. I often feel like I'm an anthropologist, like visiting a tribe in the inner Congo when I look upon white nationalists at this point. I don't really feel to be a part of them. I'm kind of an objective indifference towards a lot of it, but yeah, I think there just is a fundamental difference between the few people who are genuinely attempting to add to discourse and to affect people with words, and those whose raison d'etre really is, calling out the Jews, or, dropping in bombs here and there. I can do, there's nothing else to them. There's this kind of, you hit this wall with them where that is it. And it becomes, yeah, you're going to get yourself banned. And so to that extent, the establishment hates you. But you're ultimately running up against this brick wall of defeatism and victimization. You're martyring yourself for no real purpose, other than yelling at Jewish journalists or calling out Jews in the media or using foul language and making fun of blacks, etc. That's ultimately useless at the end of the day. You're ultimately, particularly the calling out Jews, you're just basically establishing the fact that you are powerless, and you're raging against them endlessly. But that, you're going to hit a brick wall of defeat and futility pretty quickly doing it.
It's interesting because I think that there is a kind of mentality that, for example, the racial slurs and the racial humor, and the racial caricature and this sort of thing, propagandists, if you can call them that, in the DR, view these things as valuable because it's a way of kind of drumming up the herd, right? It's getting the mob, it's drumming up the internet mob with their pitchforks and torches, to basically engage in virtual pogroms, I guess, right, on Twitter. And so I think that they may see some of these things that that you and I might be interested in kind of curtailing or limiting. It wouldn't be sad if they disappeared from social media or Twitter.